Oh my god, guys. Oh my god. Oh my god. Gojo's not back, stupid ass. What's going on, guys? This is Ty Learned. As you guys already know from the title, you guys already know what this is about. JJK 260 with a fellow guest, Jaded. Say what's up, bro.
Yo, what's up, guys? It's Jaded.
Yes, sir. And today I read this chapter. Jaded hit me up. I'm like, bro, we gotta talk about Gojo, man. What is going on right now? Today we are gonna be explaining everything, what every possibility, every realistic possibility that is, and as to what specifically is going to be happening in the next few chapters. As you heard from the intro, you know, me jokingly saying that to you guys because you guys aren't bitch. Gojo's not coming back. I'm sorry, he's not coming back. Well, I don't think he's coming back.
Well, don't cut him out yet. Don't cut him out yet. You know, we're gonna inform you of all of your delusions and illusions.
No, you're right. Me personally, I don't think so. But before we get into that, I want to specifically, I guess, first touch on the whole Sukuna is seeing illusions thing. Now, I want to first get your thoughts, bro. What do you think about this? What do you think about this theory?
So, I've seen a lot of people online, specifically Twitter. They're kind of reaching with it. I'm not gonna lie to say that it is an illusion. It's like it's definitely not somebody else. There's reasons that go one way or another, but I'm leaning to say that it's not actually an illusion. The editor's comment combined with just the phrasing on the page, it doesn't really make it sound like that's a person who's not actually there. You know, the big argument to say that this isn't an actual person there is that they're saying that, oh, it's a ghost, so of course it's not real. The kanji bore that they use to call this figure in the smoke a ghost, it's the same kanji that's used when Sukuna calls Kashimo irreverent in the English translation. When you translate it, it's the same thing. It's ghost. It's already been used in the manga to describe a person that's actually like standing in front of somebody else, like physically. Saying that, oh, because it's a ghost, therefore it's not real, it's not really like a very strong argument.
And I feel like another scene that a lot of people are comparing this to is when Nanami's like seeing his like I forgot who he sees, but he sees someone who was specifically important in his past life, and a lot of people are saying, oh, that's just Sukuna hallucinating before death, you know, in JJK. I honestly do not think these two scenes should be compared. I feel like these are two completely different scenarios. I feel like comparing these two is like saying that Sasuke and Eren are the same character. It's like very, very surface level arguments, you know what I mean? For one, the Nanami scene is clearly illustrating that Nanami is about to die. These are his last moments. The thing is that Sukuna and Nanami are not in a similar situation. Now, yes, Sukuna is in a little bit of a pickle because he can't use his curse techniques right now. They're a little bit lacking because he just dropped the whole fuga. However, in terms of physical output, he still is pretty strong. And again, yes, he did get hit by another black flash. But again, right after him getting hit with the black flash and then locking eyes with this quote-unquote ghost, like how Jada was saying earlier, like how even Kashimo is being referred to as a ghost, I definitely think that Gege is trying to tell us that Sukuna is seeing an actual, like, living person. Now, that being said, do I think this person is Gojo? Well, no, because there is another theory I personally have that I am more inclined to believe. But before I get into that, I'm gonna give the mic to Jaded just so he can explain to you guys why the Gojo being back theory may not actually be, like, the worst thing in the series, as you may think.
So Gojo coming back isn't terrible. I definitely don't think it destroys his character like a lot of people would say. It's a much more lengthier topic than we're gonna cover in this video, but because it gave closure on that space between himself and everybody else around, right? It kind of gave Gojo that perfect send-off. You know, he finally lost, but it's not really kind of how I imagined it personally for a couple reasons, right? Well, for one, he tells Geto when he sees him in the afterlife that he always thought that there was something between himself and everybody else, right? He says this is something he's always felt, which should really include that moment specifically too, right? He says, oh, I've always felt it, not I've had always felt it in the past. Like, he's still kind of feeling that distance between himself and really everybody else. He's no longer going to be the strongest, right? We're gonna see a mentality shift. When Gojo returns, that person who was always separate from humanity because of the nature of how he was born and the role that he was born to play, he's not gonna really be like that anymore. He's gonna be able to make back for all that time that he spent not being able to understand each other. Because if you really think about it, Jujutsu sorcerers, they connect with each other through fighting, right? That's really the quickest way you can really connect with people. For example, Ryu and Yuta, great example. Todo and Yuji. In the world of Jujutsu, the way you connect with people, at least the quickest, would be through fighting, right? Through Gojo, there's even an example with that with him and Geto. When Gojo became too strong to the point where he was taking on missions by himself, that's when Geto and Gojo both began to feel lonely because they weren't fighting alongside each other. Now that Gojo's coming back and he's going to be able to fight alongside his students, it's going to be a way for him to make back that time that he lost, and I think it's going to be more fulfilling than just ending him off.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't thinking of it like that. That is an interesting way to think about it. And I also want to add briefly, Gojo's death in general was very abrupt. Now, that's probably just Gege's intention intention, because, you know, it's like, oh my god, Gojo one chapter was just beating this guy and now all of a sudden he's cooked. Like, if he did come back, and the way that Jaded was saying, if Gege does go in a similar direction to what he was saying, honestly, maybe it would make up for that a little abrupt moment of him, you know, dying in the first place.
If you like him or if you hate him, you have to agree that his death was very abrupt. Like, it was very almost out of place, in all honesty. Flat out, Kusakabe says, like, yeah, Gojo's won. Sukuna's on his literal last legs. His body's torn apart. He just got hit by an unlimited purple. Gojo has back his infinity, RCT, post black flashes. Gojo won, and then he just suddenly lost. It kind of feels a little bit empty, in all honesty. A little bit of like a letdown. Like, it's too much from 0 to 60, you know what I mean? Yeah, so with that in mind, another way that Gojo could have came back that we honestly just thought about recently before call, I think the way that Gojo can come back, and honestly the least amount of people can complain about it, would be that if he accidentally broke the binding vow that allowed him to kill Gojo in the first place. When Sukuna was in his Maguna form and he was still in Megumi's body, or Megumi's looking body, he didn't have really the hand signs to perform the world slash, so he ended up making a binding vow where, in return for killing Gojo this one time with the world slash with no conditions, Sukuna would have to continuously use the world slash with different types of incantations, basically making the technique worse overall because there's different and more prerequisites to actually pulling off the technique. If somewhere along these last couple chapters where Sukuna's been doing realistically like different types of BS to, like, you know, make up for different points in his arsenal, like his domain, for example, where he's literally using an entire different part of his brain, if somewhere along that path he messed up and he himself didn't even know and accidentally undid the binding vow, then it would make perfect sense that of course Gojo would return, because Sukuna broke the binding vow, and when you break binding vows with yourself, the only thing you can lose is what you've gained. And what did Sukuna gain? Killing Gojo.
And it would also make up for the ridiculous amount of complaints, like, oh my, bro, everyone on Twitter, oh my god, binding vow Sunday, ho ho, Sukuna's using another binding vow, how many binding vows he's gonna use this chapter? It would actually be a repercussion for Sukuna, and now that would get that group of people to shut up. But I feel like the next best theory that we could come to is, of course, Kenjaku taking over Gojo. Now, not only would this redeem Kenjaku from the inexcusable performance he had in the Takaba fight. I don't care if you like that fight. I don't care if you think it's funny. That is not the guy who fought Yuki and Choso. That's not the guy who survived a black hole. All right, they're like, we're not saying that's the same person. So him actually coming back and then actually being given a chance to redeem himself as a villain and become way more intimidating, or showing off that side of him that we saw in the Choso and Yuki fight, along with having other characters maybe coming in, maybe finally Hikari can like stop messing around with Arami for 7 months and maybe actually come in, or maybe Maki can do something with Kenjaku like a lot of people were theorizing. We really gain nothing but just more support for the narrative, and it ties in a lot of loose ends that Gege made along the way, cooking Gojo versus Sukuna. What do you think?
In all honesty, I would prefer if Gojo didn't come back through Kenjaku taking over his body, but I don't think it's completely unlikely. And I also don't think it's an impossibility, in all honesty. Kenjaku is a very slimy guy. They say he's the guy who invented chess in Jujutsu Kaisen. He's very strategic. I don't think it's crazy that Kenjaku, through some form of pre-planning, could have figured out a way to survive. Because last time we saw Kenjaku, he just got his brain stabbed, which, I mean, does pretty much make it clear that, yeah, Kenjaku is gone. But at the same time, this is the same guy with the technique that they say in the fan book ignores biological reasoning. You can interpret that any way you want, but I definitely don't think we should count out the guy who's biologically already not really operating like anybody else around. The only hole I really see with this theory is that Yui has teleported Gojo's body, which what we think is back to Shoko, so I don't really know how Kenjaku would be able to get to it. But if he did manage to find his way to Gojo's body and he did actually take it over, there's a real serious problem for Yuji and basically everybody else around, because your body, after performing Jujutsu in there for a certain amount of time, there's muscle memory that goes into it, right? When you perform actions repeatedly in the same body, they become second nature, they become ingrained. So even if Kenjaku doesn't really know how to use the Limitless, he's going to be using a body that has the muscle memory of somebody who's been using it for 30 plus years. So with that in mind, we actually have a really big threat, probably the biggest threat that we're ever going to see in Jujutsu Kaisen, at least for now, because Sukuna's weakened to hell. He's been weakened for quite a while. He can't even regenerate his arms. He does have back this domain in this recent chapter, but he's still getting thrown around by Yuji. He still has half of the CE that he had before. He's just not at 100%.
Yeah, and he also got hit with another Black Flash that hits his soul, so there's really no telling how weakened Sukuna is now at this point. Especially next chapter, he's probably just gonna be coughing up blood and like tweaking.
Let's say Kenjaku did come back in Gojo's body with everything I've just said. I think even Sukuna has a real threat in his hands, in all honesty.
It would be so cool to see, because, I mean, yes, It would be really cool to see because, yes, it would become second nature to Kenjaku and it would be easier to use Gojo's ability slowly but surely. But we already seen Gojo using his maximum capacity and how it literally, like, kills himself trying to do this. So it would be kind of interesting to finally see Kenjaku, like, actually in full glory. And then that in the end being his own downfall. I feel like writing-wise, that sounds great. However, the main problem is not only is Gojo's body back in Jujutsu High, if this somehow happens and, you know, we just see we see Kenjaku lift up Gojo's hair and we see the stitches, I think the series just ends, bro. I'm not gonna lie, like, I don't know how they're gonna beat him.
Yeah, I really don't know what they would do in that state, in all honesty. Their best chance at that point, hypothetically, if we were to jump into like 3 different hypothetical logical loops right now, they would have to do something similar to what Yuji is doing with Sukuna, where he's punching different areas of the soul, I guess, and he would have to force Gojo to wake back up and take control. But we'll talk about that when we get there, if we actually get there. But I don't think all hope is lost. I just think it's very grim.
Another thing as well is if he was actually hallucinating, like how Nanami is seeing his past and, you know, he's just getting cooked, why isn't Sukuna seeing, let's say, Kashimo, who he actually had a one-on-one conversation with and actually acknowledged as strong despite him not even being on that level? I feel like he wouldn't just only see Gojo because that wasn't the only important person to him. And speaking of important people to Sukuna, Yorozu, like, are we missing something here? Yorozu is also the only person who, like, actually was showing, like, Orame is just a glazer, but Yorozu was actually saying that how she genuinely, like, loves Sukuna.
So one more thing about the idea that Sukuna's hallucinating, because it's currently the most popular theory really about it, I don't really see a reason for why he would be thinking back to Gojo. I also don't really think Sukuna's body's in that critical of a condition. I have a couple reasons for it. So the first reason is that, one, he can obviously use domain expansion. In the series, when people's bodies are weakened to an extent, they can't really perform domain expansions, or their domain expansions just break entirely. We saw in Gojo vs. Sukuna himself had to heal with reverse curse technique before popping another domain expansion. Dagon got the domain expansion beaten out of him. When your health bar reaches that low point, you can't really open or maintain a domain expansion anymore. Sukuna flat out says it himself in the Gojo fight, like I just said. So, in reality, physically, Sukuna isn't even at his weakest. That's the truth, because he can still use domain expansions, while before he couldn't use domain expansion. His soul might be weakened, but if it's a physical thing that as to why he's hallucinating, then I really don't see the argument. I think his soul could be weakened, he could be on low HP, no. His soul could be weakened, he could have low cursed energy, he can just not be at his best in that realm, but if he's hallucinating because of a physical matter, he's not even at his lowest point physically, because he can still use domain expansion.
Yeah, or it's like with Kashimo, it's like, oh, you're not Gojo, you know what I mean? Or like, oh, you or Satoru. He never genuinely, like, a lot of people make fun of the Sukuna and Gojo glazing each other, but Sukuna doesn't, like, genuinely love this guy. Like, we gotta not have that misinterpretation.
So I agree with Tylern when it comes to that, because I think Yorozu was far more influential than Gojo was, in all honesty. He thinks back to Yorozu multiple times. He thinks back to specific things that Yorozu said, or specific Yorozu-like things that Yorozu said. Overall, I just think Yorozu was a much more important figure in Sukuna's character. Although he did say, I will always remember you Satoru Gojo, he's been remembering Yorozu, you know what I mean? Like, these are things that we've seen happen versus Sukuna saying, like, oh, I will always do this thing, you know?
Yeah, he is not worried about that. And also, not for nothing, this all happens in one page. For all we know, next chapter, it could literally be Yuji's, like, pupils turning and seeing him. It literally is because it's just one page, a lot of people are assuming. But it could just be he's locked in for a quick second. Next page, he's probably going to see him.
Sukuna's really had those strongest connections with the people who are the strongest, right? But out of all those people, he seems to have had the strongest connection with Yorozu. Yorozu is the only person who, even after the fact, Sukuna still thinks about. He doesn't really think about Gojo in the same way that he thinks about Yorozu, unless it's really in relation to, oh, I'm so weak because of my fight with Gojo. But that's not even really talking about Gojo as a person.
But, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, as you could tell, there are a lot of interpretations as to what the fuck this last page of chapter 260 was. I want it to be Kenjaku as Gojo. I'm not gonna lie, that would just, oh my god, that would make the series a lot more interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's like the things that he thinks about in regards to Yorozu. If you go to the chapter for where Gojo's first unsealed, that's really the first time we see Sukuna think back to something that Yorozu said. These quotes, they're meaningful. They're about love. They're about things that Yorozu was trying to instill in Sukuna that Sukuna doesn't really understand because he doesn't really think that they're important. That's not really something that he has with Gojo or Kashimo. they don't really attempt to teach him about that. They kind of seek Sukuna to learn about it. Yorozu is the one who's actually trying to teach the strongest about it, and it seems like her imprint is still on Sukuna because he's still thinking about this stuff. When it comes to Nanami hallucinating about Haibara had meaning to Nanami, so it's a little bit different. Gojo doesn't really have that meaning. If it were to be somebody, I think it would be Yorozu. It being Gojo doesn't really make too much sense. A lot of people brought up the argument that, oh well, Yuji really didn't see that Gojo because, you know, it's the narrator flat out says, oh, Sukuna had seen blah blah, right? So why didn't Yuji see Gojo if Gojo was standing right there? Well, for one, Yuji just landed a black flash. Black flashes are like the definition of you have to be in the space. Like you have to be in the zone. You have to be highly concentrated on what you're about to do. Yeah, 100%. It could also be that Gojo just flat out just teleported right there if he just got there. It's not like he's been walking up there. You know what I mean?
But with that being said, you guys already know, man. Go and check out Jaded down below. Drops the best JJK content. I'm not even glazing. Look at the editing. He's got that shit on him. With that being said, if you guys want to go and check out my other videos, I think one of them is probably going to be on the screen right now. And you guys can go and check out my channel. With that being said, if you want more JJK videos, comment down below. And I'll see you guys in the next one.